Howdy partners, it's so good to be here again. Finally here with the top 30 games of 2024. I'm doing these videos later than most people, but you know what? I don't even care because I like to take my time with these lists. I think they're quite important and I like to keep busy. There's a lot more to life than just playing video games. And let's be real, some of these gigantic games take a minute or two to complete. And before we get started with the list, of course, these are very strange times in the industry. I would know, I'm in it myself. It feels like storm clouds are brewing in the distance. It never ceases to amaze me to see how many layoffs there have been in this year alone. It never ceases to be shocking to me to see all these layoffs keep happening. And at this point, it's affecting people that I know personally as well. And I wake up every morning super grateful to continue doing the work that I'm super passionate and proud of. I love this career in Medium, and I aim to continue doing that for the foreseeable future. So I do want to take this moment to shout out all my friends and others who I don't know personally who have been affected by this. And this is also part of the reason why I put so much effort into these year-end videos, to create this moment to remember the incredible potential of our industry. I do genuinely believe that we're the bright eye in the middle of this hurricane that's raging on. So this is to all the heroes who are out there working their asses off and creating incredible pieces of video game art that continue to inspire all of us. You are a constant source of inspiration to all of us, and me personally as a game developer, I am constantly in awe with what you guys produce. It's with great pride that I can say that I work alongside all of you in this wonderful industry, as chaotic and terrifying as it may be at times. It's the people in the end that really make the work shine. So once again, hats off to all of you. And before officially kicking off this list, it's not going to be your usual top 5 or top 10 games, because that is just not nearly enough to paint a clear picture of how much talent there is in this industry. There have been so many incredible games that came out in this single year, both on the indie and AAA side. So I prefer to take a step back and take a historical snapshot of what the year in gaming was like in 2024. So grab a seat, grab your Darambozia, and enjoy. It will be a bit of a ramble, but I think it should be entertaining for all of us. Let's just have fun. That's what games are about, generally speaking, right? Even the ones that can stress us out at times. So we got 30 games to talk about today, but before kicking off, I have one last disclaimer. No, I did not 100% finish all of these games. Ain't nobody got time for that. I think if I dropped my job and all I did was play games for the whole year, I think I would still fail on that task. Some of these games are gigantic, super time consuming, and perhaps dangerously addictive too. But jokes aside, I really do have many interests that go outside of video games in my life, and I'm perfectly happy with that. Not least of all, working full-time as a level designer. That does take a gigantic piece out of the pie in the time that I have. But nonetheless, even if I haven't fully completed a game, there's so much inspiration that I've gotten that even if I just had the time to dip my toes in the game, it is well worth it. Better that than nothing at all. And as always, who knows where brilliant ideas can come from? They can come from unexpected places. So with all that being said, let's get the list started. At number 30, I am choosing Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, a game developed by Ninja Theory. This is the follow-up to a game that made a monumental impact on the games industry back in 2017, and perhaps the sequel does follow a little bit too closely in its predecessor's footsteps in terms of its gameplay formula, but there is no denying that this is an emotionally impactful piece of video game art. The cinematographic quality alone is some of the best in the industry, and its unique take on mental health and how the developers represent the character's psychosis is still peerless in the industry. And this is a game that is available on the Xbox Game Pass. At least it was back when it first launched. And in fact, now that I think about it, the next several games on this list are games that are available through the Xbox Game Pass. So moving on to number 29, Frostpunk 2 is a kind of game that usually isn't my cup of tea. And another example why the Xbox Game Pass is so valuable to me, because it gives me an opportunity to try out games without breaking the bank. So I might not really be an adept in city building, strategy, survival games, but I'm not so ignorant as to not recognize talent and quality when I see it. I know some people out there are absolutely crazy about this game, and frankly, I totally get the hype. I think for other kind of gamers, this could be a super impactful experience for them. Additionally, I always relish the opportunity to shout out Polish game developers, though on a more somber note, even with the success of this game critically and commercially, 11-bit studios had to lay off developers and cancel a project that they were referring to as Project 8, a game that's been in development for 6 years or so. It's a reminder of the bitter cold reality of this climate in the games industry that we're in right now. At number 20 is a bit of an unusual choice for me. People who know me understand that I'm much more in the indie art house experimental type of games and films, but every now and then I do crave myself some blockbuster action. So Call of Duty Black Ops 6's campaign marks a promising return to form for this long-standing first-person shooter series. There are numerous standout action set pieces, as well as a solid espionage story with blistering combat sequences. Frankly, I didn't put any time into multiplayer or zombie mode because that's just not the kind of gaming experiences I'm interested in. in. Though I do want to highlight this as an important milestone for not just the games industry, but for gamers themselves and their own financial well-being, because this is a game that's available on the Xbox Game Pass. Finally, I can play a Call of Duty campaign without paying full price. And no, the length of a game's story versus its price is not everything. We are still more than happy to pay full price for a polished, innovative, and memorable single-player gaming experience. But let's be realistic. Games are expensive as hell nowadays. Even for me, a senior level designer who, all things considered, has a pretty good pay. I obviously can't complain too much, but still, AAA games in Canada, Montreal for where I am, are still for $89.99, and when you include tax, we're busting $100. For a single game. That is crazy. What can I tell you? Welcome to the modern dystopia. And I'm even seeing games at $93.49 on online stores. And I expect it's only going to grow higher the further on we go. So apart from Black Ops 6 being a damn good campaign, I love the precedence this sets for being able to enjoy a great campaign without breaking the bank. At number 27, we have yet another game that was released on the Xbox Game Pass, and it also happens to be another first-person shooter. However, it's as different as it could possibly be from Call of Duty. Stalker 2: Heart of Chernobyl is a brutal post-apocalyptic survival horror game, and frankly, it's a miracle that it ever saw the light of day. Though these are challenging times for the games industry, our struggles pale in comparison to what our Ukrainian developers at GSC Game World had to endure. Though the war continues to be waged in Ukraine, they still managed against all odds to ship this game. However, it is important to note that the state that the game came out in is rough as hell. There's simply no sugarcoating it. I've personally had numerous issues plaguing, if not outright breaking the game experience. But even so, I see a brilliant game buried beneath the rubble of bugs and broken pieces. I think with time given from the developers to patch the game and with the community supporting this game with mods, I think it will reveal the fantastic game that is there. At the very least, if I'm considering the landscape of 2024 gaming, I cannot shake Stalker 2 out of my mind for either political or gameplay creativity reasons. I'll be very curious to revisit this game at a later date. Moving on from the selection of interesting Xbox Game Pass titles, at least for the brief moment, at number 26 is a game that made a huge impact on gamers' lives. Helldivers 2 is not only one of the most commercially successful games of the year, it sold something like 12 million copies within its first 3 months, absolutely bananas, but it is also one of the most beloved shooters of the year. And confession, maybe people are gonna roast me on this one, but I have not played this game. It kills me, I know. I'm just not really a multiplayer gamer, and when it comes to shelling out, once again, more money on a game that I know that I'm not gonna put that much time on, there you go, I made my choices. But even so, you'd have to be deaf, dumb, and blind, even from a distance seeing people play this game, to not recognize the incredible quality and fun that people are having. This is a game that's gonna rank way higher in other people's lists, and I totally get it. Hell yes, this game is kick-ass. So moving on from the violence and action that is all too present in modern video games, and yet another Xbox Game Pass release, at number 25 I'm choosing Botany Manor. This is a short, sweet, and enchanting first-person puzzle game that asks you to grow a bunch of plants in order to progress in this beautiful and colorful mansion. Not only are the puzzles clever and satisfying to solve, but the vibrant art direction is quite the beauty to behold, much like these lovely plants you're trying to grow. I'll be honest, this is one of the calmest and more zen-like experiences I have in gaming all year long, so it very much is a breath of fresh air. Pun totally intended. And keeping thematic with the colorful art direction, at number 24 I am choosing Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail. Have I played a single second of Dawn Trail? Nope. I am still making my way through the Heavensward expansion. Currently, I am well into the Dragonstone War narrative arc, and I am loving every second of it. Though I am on a bit of a hiatus right now, I have been focusing on finishing off as much as I can the 2024 releases before this list, so I still have ways to go before I get to this expansion here. But even so, I am fascinated with what I have seen around this latest expansion in one of the most, if not the most celebrated MMORPG at this point in time. From what I understand, because obviously I don't want to spoil myself anything whatsoever in this game, either what's happening in this expansion or any of the events that could be leading up to it, Dawn Trail is a bit of a narrative reset that will allow future expansions to springboard to new, exciting heights, all the while providing the player with some outstanding gameplay. I've heard a lot of praise from friends regarding the dungeon design as well as the boss battles. I was going to say that I can't wait to play this, but in reality I think I'm still a few years away from getting to this expansion, and by that time I guess we'll have yet another expansion or two for me to catch up on still. But until then, I'm having a blast, and I'm glad to hear that everyone's really appreciating this latest continuation. And at number 23, once again with this very vibrant and colorful art direction. Before diving back into darker video game territory, the latest entry in the Legend of Zelda franchise is breaking new ground. Echoes of Wisdom is the first time we get to play as the titular Princess Zelda herself, and it's about damn time. It took what, like 38 years to get there? Anyway, it seems that once again we're following in the trend of Breath of the Wild and this very systemic approach to gameplay. In this game, you have a rather ingenious mechanic where you can create echoes, which in essence are these clones of objects you encounter in the world, or even enemies potentially, that allow you to overcome challenges and solve brain-teasing puzzles. There's no one way to solve the challenge, so it's really up to you and your creativity. Though I think everyone will agree that the bed is the most versatile object ever in this game. The term beauty sleep has taken on a whole new meaning, and perhaps this might not be the greatest Zelda game of all time, which is a preposterously high level of standard that they have set and somehow continue to surpass. This is still one of, if not the most compelling Nintendo Switch exclusive to come out this year. I highly recommend it. And number 22, we have the last big release of 2024. And this one was quite a surprise in a few ways. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle might be the most compelling game to come out from under the Xbox umbrella this year. The developers at Machine Games are known for their bloody carnage in the latest iteration of the Wolfenstein series, and in some twisted way it is appropriate that they get to continue wreaking havoc on the Nazis, just this time as Indiana Jones himself. And it is curious to see them tackle this franchise in a first-person perspective, but all things considered, this is a super compelling game. The story is interesting and the cinematic quality is superb, and I also really appreciate the craft behind the puzzle design and how it ties into the world. And finally, the game looks beautiful. I think everyone was worried how this would turn out, but honestly, this is a hit. The AAA industry desperately needed a win on their side, even if it came out at the last second in the year. There have been many inspiring horror games that came out in the year 2024, and they absolutely deserve your attention. Some of these are a little obscure, so take note. At number 21, I'll start off with Crow Country. This is a love letter to the PS1 era of survival horror games, popularized by games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill. Though it clearly borrows DNA from those legacy games, it still has a unique flavor and many surprises in store for you. Crow Country can be quite challenging, and its puzzles memorable, and the art direction has a boatload of personality going far beyond the PS1 style aesthetics. There's a lot of quirky humor and bizarre disturbing details peppered throughout this short zombie adventure, and I do love these games that are on the shorter side. It will take you roughly 6 hours to finish Crow Country. I am totally fine with that. I much prefer a short, concise, and memorable experience rather than just having a bunch of AAA filler content to artificially extend the runtime. Now, I know the AAA industry has been making a bad name for itself, and let's be honest, they totally deserve it. Though that being said, we will be taking a moment to highlight the success stories in that realm of gaming, because this is the kind of quality and culture that we as fans are expecting from them. And I will say they're not necessarily the biggest productions. In fact, one might argue that they're more on the AA than AAA side. I still struggle to wrap my head around some of these definitions. Whatever, they're great games, so we're going to talk about them in a moment. But before we do that, I still have one or two really weird experimental indie horror games that I feel compelled to talk about. At number 20, we have Threshold, the shortest game on this list. It took me a little bit over an hour to finish my first run. And I dare say perhaps this is the only year-end gaming list that is including this game. I haven't heard anyone talking about this game, and frankly, I'm lucky myself to have even caught wind of it. Thank you to my colleague who's shown a light on this little indie game. In any case, right from the start, you know you're in for one twisted gaming experience. The first thing the game asks you to do is to choose which country you're from, and that's not going to affect the language, it's actually going to affect the difficulty of the game. What ensues is a very grueling job where you have to make sure that the train keeps running, all the while having a dangerously low amount of oxygen, forcing you to chomp into these sinister gas canisters to prolong your life long enough to finish your shift. Things only get stranger from here on out until the finale, which is one of the biggest what the fuck moments I've had in any game this year, and perhaps even a little bit beyond that. I will obviously not spoil what that is, but I do want to highlight that Julien Eveillé was the sole developer behind this passion project. As I understand it, he was the level designer at Arcane on Dishonored 2 and Deathloop. I do love shouting out these kind of visionary one-man army kind of developers, and I promise it will not be the last time we see something like that on this list. More on that later. But moving on to number 19, under normal circumstances, I would have easily said that Threshold has the biggest what the fuck moment of any game this year. But soon after, I got sucker punched by an arguably even more disturbing disturbing indie horror game. Mouthwashing takes you on a journey into space, where you and a handful of crew members are stranded in your spacecraft after a tragic and mysterious accident. I love the non-linear narrative structure that slowly reveals the mystery hidden behind the cause of the accident, and in parallel you begin to understand the mental state of your crew members, and you discover shocking revelations. I particularly got a kick out of the experimental puzzle design, as well as the use of non-linear geometry in an otherwise small footprint on this ship. Another game that has a very limited footprint, and it uses to great effect. And as esoteric and strange as it may be, there's an oddly profound poetic quality about it. There's some truly twisted and gruesome moments in this relatively short 2-3 hour journey. I loved it. As promised, moving on to bigger games with bigger scopes. Are these more AA than AAA? Perhaps. Even for me being a game developer, it's not super obvious how to classify them, but ultimately who cares? Regardless of what we classify it as, nobody can argue with the fact that Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 was a total smash hit in 2024. The scale of the combats in this game are awe-inducing. Epic feels inadequate of a word in the face of these gigantic hordes of aliens swarming your defenses. I remember playing the tutorial level at the office, and all the level designers just kind of huddled around my desk to just marvel at the signature set pieces developed in this tutorial level. Usually this kind of epic level of content is reserved for the last level, not the opening chapter of a game. And not only is the art direction super colorful, with inspiring personality tailored to these alien worlds, it's just a damn fun shooter to play, either alone or with friends. And I think it reminded us all of simpler times back in the Xbox 360 days, where you didn't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel in terms of game mechanics. All you really need sometimes is just a damn good shooter with a compelling campaign. So lock and load and just shoot the shit out of aliens. Next up at number 17 is, without question, the funniest game of the year. Like a Dragon Infant 12 has our hero Ichiban go to Hawaii of all places. The location is beautiful and colorful, but there's all sorts of trouble in paradise. Ridiculousness ensues, as they always do in these games. Honestly, there are so many crazy moments that just have me laughing my ass off. This is a game that is exploding with personality. And the minigames continue to blow me away with not only their variety, but also just the volume of them. And the combat is equally just as wild as anything in this game, and it's super fun and engaging. I just wish I could just soul split and have the bandwidth to actually finish this game. But nonetheless, this is a game that came out early in 2024, back in January, and throughout the entire year, it still held its ground and is one of the most memorable gaming experiences of the year. Next, at number 16 is a bit of an unsung hero when it comes to action games in 2024. That will be Stellar Blade, developed by Shift Up. This is a remarkably robust action-adventure game. Accidentally inappropriate pun, because our heroine is rather busty, and some of those costumes you can unlock, oh god, I see what you guys are doing. In any case, this game features some supremely well-designed combat mechanics. It's challenging without ever feeling overly punishing, and super satisfying overcoming the grueling boss fights. There are some epic fights in this hack and slash. And graphically, this game looks stellar. The puns keep on coming. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't recall many notable games coming out of South Korea. I think the only one that comes to mind is Liza P. Anyway, it's exciting to see this kind of incredible talent surge out of that part of the world. And it's even more surprising when you consider that Shift Up previously only had experience doing mobile games. So this is a colossal leap in quality and scope. And this is also hands down one of the best PlayStation 5 exclusives of the year. Not that there were that many in 2024, but regardless, Stellar Blade crushes. Now this is the part of the list where it starts getting really hard ranking my favorite games. A reminder to, as always, take it with a grain of salt, let's just have fun and celebrate the greatness of games wherever they are ranking on this list. We're really here to just spotlight the incredible effort and hard work put in by developers. And I'll take this as another opportunity to highlight the fact that I don't play that many early access games. Don't misunderstand me, I love the initiative. I think it can make a gigantic impact on the final quality of a game. But I do keep busy in my life, so I would much rather just wait until the final version of the game. I'm doing enough playtesting and debugging in my everyday life as is, so I generally prefer to wait until the V1 version is out. However, I could not wait one more second to try out Hades 2. Supergiant Games have been on a legendary indie game development win streak, one game after another. Literally each of their games are an instant classic in my books. And it all culminated with their last game, Hades, which is hands down the game of the year for 2020. It is a landmark achievement by all perspectives. So it is curious to see that this is the first time that the studio makes a sequel to any of their games. And I don't think they could have picked a better subject. Already with what is available here in the early access is simply staggering. Frankly, it eclipses most AAA games in sheer size and replayability, let alone the creative, artistic, narrative powerhouse that this game is. It is an astounding achievement, and I don't even want to play more right now. Let them cook. I'll come back once they're ready and just totally lose myself in the experience, which I know is gonna happen. And number 14, we have a game that is a Gatling cannon of creative, weird, experimental indie ideas. That will be none other than UFO 50. Essentially, this game is a collection of 50 NES-style games from the 1980s. This is very much a love letter to the NES era of gaming, where you're dusting off the cobwebs from these NES cartridges in the game's library menu. I see these as these kind of dusty, forgotten relics from the past. Personally, the NES era was a little bit before my time. I grew up on the N64, so I think for other people this might resonate stronger in terms of the nostalgia from their childhood. But even so, it's impossible not to recognize the mad scientist creativity run wild over here. No two games in this library are anything alike. We're ranging from quirky minigames, party games, some that can even be played cooperatively with another player. You got shmups, beat 'em ups, all sorts of weird ideas. It's hard to illustrate just how much of a daunting challenge it is to design one of these kind of games, let alone 50 of them. And some of these individual games, if they stood on their own and were sold on the Steam store, for example, I don't think anyone would bat an eyelash or cry foul. This is a shockingly robust collection of indie experimental ideas. I still kind of can't believe that it came out quite in this way. I think this is the kind of game that's just putting the entire industry to shame at times, myself included. Moving on to number 13, we are blessed with a remarkable remake of a game that honestly started a lifelong love and the kind of inspiration of the likes that few games have been able to match. Persona 3 Reload revisits the PS2 classic that I did love, but even back then I admit was a little rough around the edges. And now they made it into a must-play JRPG in 2024. This is essentially the same game as it was back in 2007, at least the FES version that I was initiated on. But here it gets an incredible visual upgrade along with a wealth of user experience and gameplay improvements that puts it on par with that masterpiece Persona 5. Same great story, just Super Saiyan version of Persona 3. Do you need any other reason to play this game? I'm absolutely head over heels in love with this Japanese gaming series. Not only is this a remarkable adventure, but the moral fiber present in Persona games is something I rarely see in games. Making meaningful connections and relationships is your real superpower in this game. Imagine that. And you actually learned something in these Japanese high schools as a student, so don't forget to study for your exams. At number 12, we have Prince of Persia and the Lost Crown. Not only has it been a really long time since the last time we got a Prince of Persia game, it's been what, like 10 plus years now? But this is also without question the best Ubisoft game to come out in the last 5-10 years. These are dark times for that company indeed. We shall see what the future of that company will be like in the coming months. But it is a bummer that this game, even though it was critically beloved, it wasn't the mega commercial hit it could have been. Which is a huge shame because I feel like this is the antidote that Ubisoft players were waiting for all these years. For those who did get a chance to play it, they were blessed with an incredible 2D platformer Metroidvania style of game. The action is fierce and compelling, the parkour navigation is surprisingly deep and challenging. As a level designer, I truly admire the rhythm and variety of the challenges crafted for the player. And even if some of them were tough, they're always satisfying to tackle. And I do love the unique abilities you acquire that also serve an excellent parkour navigation rather than just solely for combat. Also, the art direction is gorgeous. And I need to spotlight the fact that there was a miraculously polished version on the Nintendo Switch, which is the version I played on, that was near identical in terms of graphics and gameplay to PC and PS5 Xbox consoles. Usually the Switch version comes out significantly inferior in comparison, so it is an achievement worthy of celebration as far as I'm concerned. And last but not least, the story is also super interesting as well. Seriously, my highest recommendations if you're looking for a great 2D Metroidvania. And once again, hands down, best Ubisoft game in years. Before jumping to the top 10 games of the year, I do want to go over one of the biggest releases of the year. That will be Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, the second part of the reimagining of the classic game that came out on the PS1. It is a colossal project. In fact, I'm rather shocked just how much they managed to cram into this one game. There's a super dynamic and exciting hack and slash action game integrated into this JRPG, revitalizing it and giving an innovative modern gaming experience. And there's a wealth of minigames that are surprisingly fleshed out and kind of addictive. And though in many ways this is a linear narrative adventure, there's also an entire open world game at the core of the experience. We even have Ubisoft towers in this game. My coworkers did not believe me when I said that. They thought I was joking. I'm really not. Perhaps the game does bite off more than it could chew at times, and as a result it can feel a little bloated. But the outstanding factor of this game is the way this version treats the story and characters of one of the most beloved games of all time. It's faithful to the original story while adding some truly unique twists and turns. This experience is further elevated by the cinematic and graphical quality that makes Final Fantasy VII Rebirth among the very best games you'll find in 2024. I'm delighted with how this latest entry in this legendary franchise turned out. It does feel like we somewhat re-entered in this golden era of Final Fantasy games in some sense, and I cannot wait to see how the final chapter of the reimagining of this classic game will turn out. If it's anything like these first two parts, I think we're in for a real treat. Finally, the top 10 games of 2024. Things are getting hot in here, literally and figuratively. These are the games that made the biggest impact on me in 2024, not only because they have brought countless hours of fun, but these are projects that, especially as a game developer, make me dream of the possibilities within this gaming landscape. And a few of these choices might be surprises, especially where I'm personally ranking them on this list. Once again, I want to remind you all that I am not the be-all end-all arbiter of truth. These lists are all quite subjective, and these games are tailored to my tastes in particular. But even so, I think it's hard to argue with the incredible craft and creativity of these games. So without further ado, let's finish this list. To kick off the top 10, I am choosing a game that started off rough as hell. Yet I pushed through this experience because I saw the incredible potential of this underdog, Black Myth Wukong. By the end of this game, I was floored. Though I will admit, I started off rather lukewarm to this game and had very mixed feelings. Don't even get me started on the invisible collisions. As a level designer, I placed my fair share of invisible collisions, and in that regard, this game was beyond the pale. Oh my god! And a lot of the map exploration, especially when it comes to orienting yourself in this world, were a little problematic and I felt like weren't super well thought out. Perhaps with more experience and more feedback, this is the kind of issue that would be ironed out, but there it is. However, when it comes to the combat, it is a very different story. It was a supreme experience that just grew on me the further I got in the game. It took me a while to get used to it because it's got a different flow from most action games, but man did it just click in place, and it was one of the most spectacular action games of the year. And it is interesting that the structure of this game often felt like a gauntlet of bosses one after another, and their presentation was out of this world cool. And they were challenging, absolutely pulverizing at times, but it is most certainly worth the effort of overcoming these daunting odds, especially when it comes to that secret boss required to get the true ending of this game. I'm not going to spoil what that is, but I am here to tell you that if you are playing this game and you are enjoying it, you owe it to yourself to check this out and see this quest through to its very end. That boss fight might just be the most epic thing, certainly of this year, but maybe even well beyond that. It is one of the most epic and glorious things I've ever seen as a gamer and game developer. I was absolutely dumbstruck. I want to highlight that I do not say these things lightly, but that moment just brought my spirit into game development nirvana. Holy crap. And on top of all that, frankly, the game is gorgeous. I love all the Buddhist imagery featured in this game. It's got this larger-than-life quality and it is regularly breathtaking. And of course, add on top the incredible variety and meticulous polish and personality to each of the bosses in this game, and there's quite a few of them. This game did start off at the bottom of the barrel, but goddamn did it claw its way back on the top and came out as a champion. Truly inspiring to see the level of success this Chinese game has made, even with all its flaws. As I've said in the past, I'd much rather get a game with soul, even with its rough edges, rather than just some polished cookie-cutter formula. This was a smash hit in every sense of the word. At number 9, we have Pacific Drive, a fascinating first-person post-apocalyptic survival game. This is the kind of weird indie gem that is a bit of an acquired taste, but for me personally, this is one of the games that inspired me the most this year. It's as slow burn of a gaming experience as they come. You are completely alone in this desolate world, plagued by mysterious anomalies that will keep you on your toes as you explore and scavenge for resources. Alone, that is, apart from your vehicle that starts off in a borderline undrivable condition. But you get to develop an intimate bond with your car since you're basically your own mechanic in this game and you get to pimp your own ride to your own liking. And granted, it does have a very manual and labor-intensive gameplay loop that may have exhausted some players, but personally, I found it to be very engaging. I like to think of this game as this avant-garde driving sim as a subgenre. There are a lot of neat ideas packed into this one game. And because of all the time and effort I put into my vehicle, I became super emotionally attached to it, and whenever I would go out about in the world, I would be super careful with it. In fact, it reminds me of the relationship I developed with my horse in Red Dead Redemption 2. Let me tell you, I mourned the death of my first horse, and when I eventually got myself a second horse, I took care of that thing like nothing before. And there's also a fascinating mystery at the core of the world building. The art direction and ambience also does a lot of the heavy lifting to elevate the game experience. I just have one regret with this game, and that is the fact that I didn't have more time to play it. But even with the limited time I got to spend with this game, Few games have made me dream like this one. At number 8, we have the minimalistic tearjerker Niva. It's been a minute since we've heard anything from the Barcelona-based developers at Nomada Studio. Their last project, Gris, took the indie gaming world by storm back in 2018, and clearly they aim to continue pushing the boundaries of a profound poetic gaming experience, regardless of how short the game may be. It took me roughly 3 hours to finish the game, and who cares how short it is if it is that wonderful. This is a beautiful journey with your cute magical doggo Niva. And yes, you can pet Niva as often as you like. She will be very happy for it, and so will you. Personally, I'm deeply appreciative of the bond you create with this mystical creature. It is equally interesting to see how the abilities of Niva evolve as you progress through the game's classic 4-season narrative structure. And even though the game's mechanics are minimalistic, they are thoughtfully designed and have a great sense of pacing. The rhythm of the parkour is simple but always engaging and matches the emotional roller coaster of the narrative journey. The puzzles may be light on difficulty but are always satisfying to complete, and there's a surprisingly compelling combat in Niva, which is a bit of a new ground for these developers. Their last game had no combat whatsoever, and even with your limited moveset, they still managed to achieve quite a bit in this game, especially with a few highlight boss fights and chase sequences. But more than anything, the art direction is simply breathtaking. The color and aesthetics are exquisitely chosen, and there's this epic sense of scale. And the beauty of this world is strongly contrasted by the environmental decline in this decaying world, a thematic that is all too appropriate in our dystopian reality today. Yes, these indie darlings are absolutely smashing, and a healthy reminder that more is not necessarily better, but let's not forget to give the biggest and most ambitious games of the year their moment in the sun as well. They most certainly deserve to be showered in praise as well. Look no further than my pick at number 7 with Metaphor ReFantazio. The team behind the Persona series is smashing us with yet another gigantic JRPG game, and they are once again proving that they're some of the best storytellers in the industry. For veterans of the Persona series, they might find a lot of similar gameplay elements in this game. We still have a counter system, and you have quests to complete before a certain deadline. And of course, you have a rich cast of characters where you create opportunities to forge bonds with your companions. I always thought it was a beautiful sentiment that your greatest asset is to create meaningful bonds and relationships with the people you meet along your journey. It's a beautiful idea. Love and compassion over violence. And these moments are conveyed through these anime dialogue cutscenes as well as these really well polished cinematics. So these are elements that are easily recognizable from Persona games, but I promise you Metaphor ReFantazio has a lot of its own unique flavors that change up the formula in meaningful ways. Notably, this is the team's first venture into this fantasy setting, and there's also a heavy focus on this political turmoil raging in this world. The game opens with the king being murdered in his sleep. And on top of shining a light on corruption, the game explores the impact of class division, especially with the injustice of racial discrimination, all the while also showing how religion and politics can not only oppress its people, but how power in the hands of a righteous and noble soul can pave the way towards a kind of leadership that would empower its people. Metaphor ReFantazio's core message, dedicated to a world of freedom and compassion, is truly inspiring, and it is rare to see a game tackle these kind of gigantic, complicated topics. Perhaps fiction really does have the power to inspire meaningful change. It's a beautiful message that the game aims to convey, and I find that we are in the perfect time to receive that kind of message of leadership in this world that we live in today. And when it comes to the visual aspect of this game, the anime cutscenes, as I mentioned before, are gorgeous. Though I will admit, at first glance, looking at the in-game graphics of this game, it might appear to not be super appealing. I vividly remember a YouTube comment of someone saying, "What are these PS2 graphics?" But that doesn't take into account the incredibly rich world building and art direction. I think this is a prime example of where aesthetics are much more powerful than graphic fidelity. And it is something that ages much better over time. They have created a beautiful, fascinating world filled with personality, and as dark and grim as it may be, the color palette is quite vibrant and the vistas are awe-inspiring. And the visual design of the monsters are absolutely deranged. And FYI, the monsters in this game are referred to as humans, a very clever detail that has a purpose in its narrative. I won't spoil it, but it's a very smart choice. In any case, yeah, some of the most creative monster designs you'll find in any game. And I must confess, this is yet another game that I haven't finished. In fact, it's the game that I'm playing right now. And the moment I'm done recording this video, I'm jumping back into that game to continue. I cannot wait to see what happens next, and I'm just loving the game more and more the further I progress. But even with what I have seen thus far, it is impossible not to recognize Metaphor ReFantazio as one of the most ambitious games of 2024. I think a lot of people were hoping for a Persona 6 game, but this is the next best thing. And it's also a refreshing change of pace for these developers, while they are working on that next game, whenever it will come. Take the time you need if your games are going to come out as great as this. At number 6, we have a video game project that is defying industry standards. Can a DLC rightfully be considered as a Game of the Year candidate? Well, Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree most certainly can. If we put this expansion alone in a gladiator ring with any other game that came out this year and beyond, it will hold its ground. And then some. It is a force to be reckoned with. This brand new location in the Realm of Shadows is much bigger than it initially seems. And already at first glance it's quite massive. It takes up roughly a quarter of the footprint of the entire Lands Between map from the main game. But the world is so much bigger than you think due to the intricate multi-layered environments. There are secrets constantly waiting to be discovered by curious souls. So many times I thought I'd take a short detour to just make sure I didn't miss out on any items to pick up, and I'd find myself in a rabbit hole for the next couple hours before going back to where I was before. But it's not just the size of this world. Once again, all the content feels like it was meticulously crafted rather than just being this filler systemic cookie cutter formula just to artificially extend the duration of the game. This map is positively bursting with things to do and discover, and it is all worth your time and effort. If nothing else than to bask in the visual splendor of the environments. Of course, the vistas are once again to die for, and chances are you probably will die getting there. I remember when I was booting up Elden Ring for the first time since I finished it last time, just getting ready for the DLC content, I realized that I was at the beginning of a new Game Plus round, and I was worried that I was crazy over leveled. I had all the best endgame gear, and I had a fantastic build going, so I literally just plowed my way through the entire game in no time whatsoever. Literally cut through all the bosses like a hot knife through butter, even though these are beefed up versions in the new Game Plus. So the thought did cross my mind, shit, did I just ruin the DLC for me? Am I not gonna get the kind of difficulty I was yearning for? Pah! I was in for a rude realization. Literally the first optional boss absolutely crushed me. The difficulty in this DLC is pulverizing. I think it's safe to say that some of the bosses in this DLC are among the hardest bosses of any From Software game to date. So much so that it almost felt unfair just how relentless they were. Regardless, I persevered, and I'm honored to have come out on top after countless tries just beating my head against a brick wall. And I just marvel at how epic and creatively these boss fights are designed. They are a sight to behold, and some of the most legendary boss designs in any game ever. This is a daunting challenge that I'm honored to have overcome. And as a developer, I'm just constantly enamored with the incredible level of craftsmanship that comes out from every From Software game. This could have easily been the Game of the Year for 2024. At this point, we're kind of nitpicking in the list, but I guess the only thing holding back in my eyes is the sense of novelty that is ever so slightly less fresh than it was back in 2022. But there's no question whatsoever that Shadow of the Erdtree is a colossus that transcends its meager title of DLC. It really is that good. Top 5! Things are getting really interesting now. And maybe there will be a bunch of choices here that will surprise you. Not only on which games I chose in this highest of echelon, but also on where they rank. I imagine it might be a little bit of a hot take every now and then and diverges from general consensus. So as always, take it with a grain of salt. I'm just being honest with what truly resonates with my soul. So here we go. Drumroll! My choice at number 5 is Astrobot, a game that is near universally considered to be the de facto Game of the Year for 2024, and honestly, it's kind of hard to argue with that sentiment. This is one of the most ingenious and fun games ever. Gone are the depressing and hellish landscapes that are all too present in modern games. Here we are blessed with vibrant colors and an explosive happy-go-lucky attitude. The whole time I was playing, I had a big dumb smile on my face. It's impossible not to be overjoyed playing this celebration and love letter to the last 30 years of PlayStation games. I knew this would be an entertaining adventure, but I wasn't ready for such a nostalgic trip down memory lane of gaming history for the last 30 years, and it being super cute while doing it. But without question, the biggest standout element of this game is the mind-expanding creativity in the game's mechanics. There's so many never-before-seen ideas that just gets the brain going. And there are a lot of technically challenging things that they achieved here. And it's even more impressive to consider that the game has so many dynamic objects with all these impressively unique game mechanics, and it all runs butter smooth and looks gorgeous while doing it. It is a monumental technical achievement. And it is a game that actually uses the PlayStation 5 haptic feedback, controls, and even the sound from the controller to great effect. Veritably a marvel in R&D of game development. Every game developer should be studying this project. And as if all that weren't enough, the level design is some of the best of the year. There's so much variety in each of the level, and they're always surprising and this roller coaster ride of fun. And it's a game that doesn't overstay its welcome. It'll take you roughly 10-15 hours to finish the game, maybe a little bit more if you want to be the completionist type. And this is one of those kind of games that makes your life a lot easier for those who revisit the levels. It feels like there's one objective with this game, and that is to just let the player have fun and not waste their damn time. It feels like such a massive contrast to so many AAA games out there, and it deserves to have the highest of celebrations. Perhaps the only thing that holds this game back from climbing higher on this list for me personally is that the overall structure of the game is a little formulaic. I mean that in a macro sense, not within each of the levels. There it is a delightful surprise each and every time. And personally, I prefer narrative experiences, so there's that too. Which is ironic saying that because the next game at number 4 has no storytelling whatsoever. Yet Balatro totally consumed my life more than I would like to admit. It is the most dangerously addictive game of 2024, and I think everyone will attest to that. I remember recommending this game to my director, and then the next day he writes to me like, "Dude, why'd you tell me about this game? I spent all night playing this thing. Now I'm dead tired, like he has kids and whatnot. Sorry, not sorry." Yeah, what can I tell you? Join the party. We've all spent way too much time playing this game. Within 15 minutes of playing this poker roguelike deck building game, you've been taught everything you need to know about it, and then you're just set to have a boatload of fun. It might seem a little repetitive, which frankly it is. But once you get that first build working that has an incredible synergy between its jokers, it just shoots off like a rocket and changes the way you approach each and every new run. At first it might seem like a lot of it just random luck and you have no real agency in how things play out, but there's quite a lot of strategy that you can implement to push your luck towards a winning scenario. Of course that all comes from the outstandingly creative design from the multiple jokers in this game, and they all meaningfully change the way you play your round. And then add on top all the tarot cards, the unique voucher packs, enhanced cards, and other surprises, not to mention all the other decks that you get to unlock that seriously change up the pace of how you play your rounds. Then there are also optional challenge decks. Yeah, this game is opening Pandora's box of this near limitless infinite replayability, and it manages to always feel fresh. But granted, it is a giant time sink. Be careful opening this Pandora's box. But on top of the compelling gameplay, there's a really fantastic art direction. It might be a bit minimalistic, but what it does achieve is fantastic. The aesthetic color palette works great, and the visual design of the jokers is so much fun to look at, and they really do have a great personality and easy to identify. Personally, the banana joker card blew my mind. For those who don't know me, a lot of people know me as Banana Mike as well. And what is the name of the banana card? Gros Michel. That's me! I'm Mike! Michel! Blew my fucking mind. What are the odds of that? In any case, on top of that, there's also a really compelling sound design and soundtrack that kind of gets buried in your head. Not only because it's catchy, but also plays a great function in the feedback and the user experience of the player. But arguably the best part of this devilishly ingeniously fun game is that there are no microtransactions. This is the kind of game that could have easily had it, but no, you just pay one price to get the game and just have a boatload of fun. And yet, ironically, Peggy gave it an 18+ rating, even though it's the furthest thing from a real-life gambling thing. Within 5 minutes, you can tell that there's nothing resembling anything you'd find in real-life gambling. And personally, I love that they gave it an 18+ rating. I think it's poetic. It just shows the hypocrisy when they're more than happy to give an EA sports game the lowest rating marketed towards kids, which those games are notorious for having predatory microtransactions. Big L for them, big W for local thunk. Yeah, this indie darling took the world by storm, and it is even more impressive to consider that this was developed by one person. An astounding achievement to create this near limitless replayability and an incredibly fun, synergetic gameplay experience. A bit of a gem in game design, frankly. Yeah, Local Thunk made an instant classic with Balatro. And incidentally, the next game on my list was also developed by one man, and it is arguably an even more impressive technical achievement. Of course, I'm talking about Animal Well, a rather esoteric Metroidvania kind of game developed by Billy Basso. And it's kind of astounding to consider that he built his own game engine. An amusing little anecdote, but this game has a 35 megabyte storage space, which is teeny tiny. He also did the graphics, the music, the sound design of the kangaroo. If you're interested more about the behind the scenes, go check out that video that Donkey did, who FYI played an instrumental role in publishing this game through Big Mode, which is actually their first published game, and what a phenomenal first game to have published. This is the kind of game where nothing is explained to you, and you will probably get lost from the start, and that's okay. I think everyone's gone through that. But slowly you start discovering the inner workings of this world populated by these ethereal, ghost-like animal creatures. And even though at first glance it seems to be like a Metroidvania game, in truth its core gameplay resembles something much closer to a puzzle game. And boy are there some brain teasers in this game. You're really gonna have to think outside the box and really observe closely on how your game mechanics react in the world. Honestly, this is one of the most satisfying and rewarding gaming experiences of the year. And I think a lot of that relies on what I consider to be the most creative game mechanics of the year. And yes, I'm saying that even with Astrobot that came out earlier this year. No hate on that game, obviously, but there's something about these mechanics that are not only unique in their presentation, but they have this clever and frankly novel ways that you can reuse them. It's rare that I have these eureka moments when I realize like, oh my god, I can use this mechanic in this way as well. It is an astounding achievement in game design that has stayed in my mind all year long. This might be a tiny 5-6 hour game to complete, but its impact can be likened to something of a comet coming up from outer space and just crashing into the earth and shaking the very foundations of the games industry. Absolutely floored by this game. Now, the next game was one that I was terrified to play. Not because it's scary, which it is, but it was a project that I was worried that was gonna bomb hard on launch. And yet, lo and behold, the remake of Silent Hill 2, developed by Polish game developers at Bloober Team, positively shocked me in just how amazing it turned out. To be clear, I was never hating on Bloober Team. Far from it, I was always a fan of their works, even if they were a little rough around the edges technically. I always felt they had something interesting to say and had soul doing it. But to have them helm a remake of a game that many of us consider to be among the very greatest games of all time, that seemed like a little bit too much. And let's be real, especially with the way Konami has treated this beloved series in the last 20 years, there's just a lot of emotional baggage where we're just hurt so many times. Literally everything Silent Hill oriented that came outside of Japan was kind of a disaster. So I was beyond relieved to see just how well this remake was handled. They respected the core values of Silent Hill 2. There were interesting new level design additions, which for someone like me who knew the game like the back of their hand was very welcome. There's some refreshing ideas when it comes to the puzzle design, and this is low-key one of the best looking games of the year. The ambient is pitch perfect, and they absolutely nailed the look and feel of Silent Hill, which is not the easiest thing to do. The character models look excellent, and the darkness is a veritable abyss that was something awe-inspiring and terrifying. And yes, the game is scary as hell. Hands down the scariest game of the year and then some. Yeah, this is an experience that is not for the faint of heart. And it also happens to be a bit of a masterclass in sound design when it comes to horror games. God damn, was it effective. Honestly, I think I'm just as shocked as anyone that this game is ranking quite so high on my year-end list. I did not think that would happen, but here we are. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with Silent Hill 2. And it's also interesting to think about how I digested this game. It's a moment where I really slowed down the pacing of my gaming. Because I do find that nowadays with all these releases that are constantly coming out, whether it's in games, film, or music, I feel like we're just consuming things and jumping from one thing to another constantly without really taking the time to fully analyze and to just fully immerse ourselves in the experience. That was not the case with Silent Hill 2 Remake. I really just took my sweet ass time and was sipping on this game like fine wine. I was enraptured from beginning to end. Jeszcze raz dziękujemy za obłędną grę. Gratulujemy wszyscy. And so, finally, the game of the year for 2024 is Silent Hill 2. Not only is it the game of the year for 2024, but it was also the game of the year in 2022, and it will likely be the game of the year in 2025, and in the next years to come, as long as I breathe. I'm joking, sort of. But seriously, my pick for the spot at number 1 is a game that consumed my mind as I was playing it. In my books, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is my game of the year for 2024. Whatever expectations I had for this game, the developers at Simogo surpassed them tenfold. Right from the start, there's a deep sense of mystery surrounding this world. Yet another game where nothing is explained to you. I think you guys are getting an idea for what tickles my taste buds. But here, this game is taking that idea to the extremes. Upon entering the mansion, you are presented with several puzzles where you frankly don't even know where to begin tackling these puzzles. And then when you figure out some of the first puzzles, you think you're starting to get a flow in the game, you encounter the next group of puzzles that, even though you've decoded the riddle and you know what digit to enter for the answer, the method of entering that code is no longer so obvious. And things get only more abstract and esoteric the further you go in the game. These are truly the most mind-bending and unique puzzles of the year. They may seem impenetrable at first, but after a while you start to just shift your mental thought process and kind of find yourself on the same wavelength of this game. This is a game that stress tests your critical thinking, and it turns out to be a really mind-expanding game that left me changed for the better. I feel like my IQ might have leveled up a little bit playing this game. And the game itself recommends that you keep a notebook, in real life mind you. Initially, I scoffed at the idea, but then I realized that not only is it essential, but I developed an obsession around that idea. I had notes in my sketchbooks, screenshots on my console that I then transferred to my iPad to just draw out the problems. My phone was littered with notes, pictures, and the same applies to both my computers at home and at the office when I had annotated screenshots. I even had a bunch of post-its on my desk that I would sometimes find in my bedroom when I get home. It was madness. I literally became that conspiracy theory meme. And on top of the mind-altering puzzles, I love the art direction. The black and white aesthetic is somber and marries itself very well with the detective gameplay, and though it has a modest presentation, the level art is richly detailed. And then the surprising super saturated pink is such a violent clash in this world, especially with the black and white aesthetic, that it highlights this otherworldly mystery to electrifying degrees. This might not be the biggest, most epic game of the year. It is rather low-key and lo-fi, but no other game made me dream quite the way Lorelei and the Laser Eyes did. I can say with full confidence that this is one of the greatest experimental puzzle games of all time. Wow. And there you have it. As dark and confusing as these times in the game industry undoubtedly are, as you can see from this list, there's a massive tidal wave of talent and creativity that blessed us this year. You are all amazing. I see you, I recognize you, and I salute you. Thank you from the bottom of all our hearts for all your hard work and dedication. Your impact has most certainly been felt. So once more around the sun we go. Let's see what new surprises 2025 is going to have in store for us. I have no idea what to expect, but I'm sure it's going to be very interesting. So stay strong and keep keeping on. That's exactly what I am to do. So with all that being said, wishing you and your loved ones nothing but the best. As always, take care and talk to you soon. We got one last year-end list coming up eventually, but I'll be back with other videos before then. Bye bye, take care and talk to you soon.